Welcome to Illuminating Haze, a podcast devoted to bringing light to the dark haze as you navigate college as a social science major or a student going into emergency services or other helping profession. University of Miami student Isabella and criminologist Dr. Kara Hill discuss topics in the areas of academics, career, and mental health. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Riptide Resiliency and Empowerment Center, a nonprofit devoted to supporting those going into or currently in or retired from emergency services and the helping professions. Let's join them now.
Hi, welcome to Illuminating Haze. In this episode, we decided to focus on misinformation, disinformation, how to navigate that, how to understand that what you're seeing, mostly nowadays with social media and everything that is put out there, how to understand that what you're seeing is true, is not true, it's something that's old and people are using to get an emotion out of you. And I think that this is a really important topic, mostly since I am Venezuelan, given everything that's going on right now. There is a lot of spread of misinformation and disinformation that people are not able to understand that this was old news or this is fake. And given the amount of emotion around this subject and what's going on, a lot of people tend to just see something, send it, and it creates a dilemma because one, you're part of the spreading of misinformation. So I think it's really important to focus on how to tell that this is not something that you should be spreading. It's not something that you should be believing in because that's what they're trying to do. It's a trap. And it's important for you, just not even in just this situation, in every situation, to be able to understand and learn how to make sure that what you're reading and what you're seeing is factual information that can help you or something that is wrong and know that that's not useful for you. As well as in college students and with research papers, it's really important that you know how to get information that's going to help your paper, that it's valid, that has been reviewed by other people and has not power, that's not the word, but has not, I forgot the word. I don't know
Peer
the word.
reviewed?
No, the like has strength that can give you
Oh, validity. Yeah,
uh,
validity.
and it can help your paper, and it's something that when your professor checks it, it's valid and it's there and it's been studied before,
hmm
and it helps your paper and it helps what you're learning and it helps you as a person to really understand a broad subject and understand what's going on. So that's why we decided to do this episode on research, following misinformation, dealing with it, how to tell if it's not true. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you want to explain misinformation and disinformation first.
Yeah, sure. So first, I think I'll say I don't think anybody's excited really to talk about research, but
Yeah.
it's part of our life, and anything that you consume, from your hair shampoo to your toothpaste to your makeup to actually what app you're going to download, what social media you're really going to use, you're basing all of your opinions off of research in some way or capacity. And so I always say that because often students are like, oh, I hate research. I don't want to do it. And I'm like, but your whole life is based off of research, really, even the foods that you eat and whether or not it's healthy for you. Those are all decisions that we're making based off of research. So it is really important to understand how to know whether or not what you are reading is correct and factual. Also understanding the other side of society, and that is often we believe what we see most frequently, not necessarily what is true, right? And when you factor in things like democracy and bureaucracy and capitalism into the picture, there's a lot of connections between everything. So one of the examples I always give when I teach research, there used to be an old toothpaste commercial and it said 3 out of 4 dentists choose, and I think it was Crest, whatever it was. And I say, how many students believe that? And most students are like, yeah, like if 3 out of 4 dentists believe it, then I'm going to use it. And I'm like, but you don't know how many dentists they asked. Right? Like, what if they only asked 4 dentists? Well, there's millions of dentists in this world. And if you only ask 4, if you had added, another 1,000 to that, It would not be 3 out of 4, most likely, right? So it is just super important to understand research. So in regards to misinformation and disinformation, always super interesting. So misinformation is really just false or inaccurate information. It's really when someone gets the facts wrong. We see a lot of misinformation happen by mistake. You know, we all make mistakes, honest mistakes. We read things wrong. We hear things wrong. We only take part of the story. And often we see misinformation represented through the media. And sometimes that's intentional, but they need ratings. I always tell students, if it bleeds, it leads, right? And from someone who's been in criminal justice for many years and has been active on many scenes as a victim advocate, I would see things on the news and it would tell a portion of the story, but not the whole story. And had the whole story been told, you would have seen things a little bit differently, right? So they don't intend always to provide misinformation. People don't. They just get the facts wrong. And so that's misinformation, just inaccurate information. Disinformation, on the other hand, though, is using information with the intent to mislead someone. So I think the 3 out of 4 Dennis choose crafts, nobody like get on us about that. I'm just using it as an example, but it's a simple example to say like, okay, well, that is something that could easily mislead someone because someone believes that's the best toothpaste to use. But because they didn't understand the truth of how that research worked or didn't work, that company knew that people wouldn't check to see how many dentists really recommended that toothpaste. And so they intentionally mislead us. And I think that's a lot of what you've experienced recently with the happenings in Venezuela, right? And there's different motivations for using disinformation. I think one is it's sometimes hard to swallow to believe that our world is like that. That like media channels, politicians, teachers, leaders in our society, often companies, of course, corporations will intentionally use disinformation to mislead people. And why would they do that? To achieve the goal that they need at the end, right? So I don't know. Do you have anything to say on that, just kind of in regards to what you've experienced?
Yeah, with both misinformation and disinformation, also, whether it's a research paper or something that's going on, I do think that emotions drive a person a lot. And right now, with what's going on in Venezuela, a lot of people are driven by emotions and they see a headline, they see a news, and they automatically send it out to groups.
Yeah.
They send it to their family group chat, to their friend group chat, they post it on their Instagram story. And then they don't go that one step further to verify that that information is true. It's happened many times where right now there's a lot of news coming out that was from 2016, which was a very similar situation, but we're in 2024. So that use, and a lot of it is used to create fear within the people of what's going on. And it's like, with a dictatorship, it's like, you're not going to take me down, like look what I'm still doing. And it's like, well, no, you did that a couple years ago. Like, I understand that you can still do it now, but it's not happening now. Don't spread it. And I think this also goes into students doing research papers. I have done research papers. You get to a point where you're a little bit exhausted from reading so much and seeing so much and going through so many papers, so many articles, journals, whatever, that the first one that you see that catches your eye, you're going to be like, oh, that works for mine. That works. But you always have to go that one step further, no matter how tedious it may seem. It doesn't help you to use information that you don't know that it's valid, that it's factual, and that it has strength. Because, one, in terms of social media, which is so full of information nowadays, without you seeing and checking, you're gonna be part of the issue that is that is spreading misinformation. And I know that's no one's intention. And like I said, emotions can get the best of you, but it is a problem. And it is one person taking one step further to be like, nope, this isn't true, to disarm the entirety of, I don't know how many followers you have that believe the same thing. And it's like, no, guys, like, look, this is false. This doesn't work. For your research papers, also, if you're using information that's not valid, at the end of the day, your research paper isn't going to work. Because if you have a professor that's actually checking it, or you're sending it to people for it to be reviewed, they're going to be like, that's not true. That doesn't work. So I think even just as a society, if one person does the duty to check, you've already fixed a lot of things for other people.
Hmm.
And you create a chain of being like, don't believe everything you see, don't do this. And it's happened, I think, in every generation. Like, I remember the joke of like, your mom believes everything she sees on Facebook. And it's like, yeah, you made a lot of fun about that, but how many kids nowadays say, oh, yeah, I saw this thing, and then someone asks, where? And you're like, TikTok. So
Hmm.
you're making fun of your mom because she believed everything you see in Facebook. Now in 2024, you believe everything you see in TikTok.
Yep.
So I think it's that of, everyone gets it, everyone sees it, it happens to everyone. I've sometimes also been like, oh my God, dad, did you hear what happened? And he's like, that's not true. And I'm like, oh, it does happen to everyone. But just having that mindset of realizing that you can't believe everything you see, that not every headline it's going to be the entire truth, because like you said, some even they just get a certain section that works and they post it. So you see a headline that's not entirely true, and then you think it works, and it's halfway, it's not the entire thing.
Hmm.
So I think that's very important, mostly with the influence that social media has in every generation now. I don't think it's just my generation. I think that social media plays a huge role. And the more you see in social media and the more saturated that you are with information, one, the less likely you probably are to take that step further to research. Because if you're seeing it everywhere, like you said with the toothpaste, you're going to believe it. If I'm posting it, you're posting it, my parents posting it, everyone's posting it, that's the truth. That's how it is. That's how it happened. And you're not going to try to go beyond that. And I do think that it is hard, not just for posts or anything like that. Like, some are very easy to see that it's false. Some you really have to put in the work to be like, wait, I don't know. Like, I don't know if what I'm reading is true. I don't know if what I'm reading is biased, which biased, I think it's a huge thing right now with social media and just people seeing things, believing it, and then everything that they post is biased to whatever they saw and read. And it becomes, again, a whole chain. So that can affect a lot of public opinion, I think, and that has a
Hmm.
huge impact. And even once it's taken out of social media, you're most likely talking to people about it in real life. So the spread and the like how fast it can spread is so shocking and something that people should be so aware of, and really not take it like, oh no, do you remember that thing I said? No, it was false. Because that one person that now you're acting like, oh, it was false, like, don't worry about it, that person probably told five other people. So really, like, it's so important for you to, if you're going to share information, make sure that what you're reading is true. And like you said, disinformation is made to mislead you. It's made for that. It's designed for you to be like, oh, done, like, not think twice about it. And that's why you should care more about validating what it is that you're seeing, because there's tactics also to make you believe something that is not true. People with media, like, everything, they have those tactics. They know how to get you. Commercials, they know how to get you.
Hmm.
All the promotions, everything that you see, it's with a tactic behind to make you believe something that might not be true or might be misleading. So I think that's really important when it comes to research, and research for your papers, research for your everyday life, for everything you see, because whether you think it's not affecting you, I promise you, everything that you're seeing in social media every single day, something's going on in your brain and some things are changing that, without you even realizing it, you're starting to believe things that you don't even know if it's true. So I think that's a really important topic. And yeah, I don't know if you want to add to
Yeah,
it.
no, so true. So you touched on one thing that's important, and that is just the aspect of consumerism. And, here in the United States, consumerism is kind of the meat of our economy. We need people to consume. We need people to consume certain things, right? Whether that's from big pharma, whether that's bubbly water, like whatever it is, right? And there are media tactics that are used specifically to get us to buy these products or use these products. And so I think a couple things. One is it's your responsibility, it's social responsibility, to be responsible for yourself and to be responsible for the progression of our society. And so if you continue to just believe whatever it is that you hear without validating the information that you're giving, and then being willing to stand against your 1,000 followers who all believe A, but you know that A is not true and B is true, you have to be willing to stand on B, right? To hold on to truth. And it goes back to just kind of the morals that we've seen shift in society, that people are less worried about integrity, doing the right thing all the time, even when nobody's watching. People are less concerned with the truth. They're more concerned with how many likes they get, how many followers they get, how many friends they have, and they're not often willing to stand on the truth. And the sad part of that is that erodes the social fabric of society, right? Our norms start changing, our values start changing, and pretty soon we just see messes everywhere. And I mean, I could give you 9 million examples of that we've seen happen just in the last 10 years because of social media and what people believe. So validating your source is super important. And I'll talk about social media first, then I'll talk about it in the terms of an academic setting. In social media, validating the source is super important. Here's the thing, though. We often have an opinion, right? And you said that, right? Your brain is already going. You're kind of already siding one way or the other because of who you are and what you believe. So often when people go to validate a source and see like, well, let me see if other people off of social media, what they think about this topic, you go to the sources that you're most comfortable with. And that's number one, a problem, because that's going to continue you potentially believing information that maybe is factually wrong, so misinformation, or believing in disinformation. So you have to check the other side. So here's a horrible example, but a very easy example. So if you're a Fox News person and you're wondering about a topic and you just want to see what the news is saying, if you're a Fox News person, which is going to say something about your political beliefs, you don't go to Fox News. You go to the other side, right? And you go and see, well, what are they saying? And because the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? That's what they always say, that there's truth to the right, truth to the left, and that truth is somewhere in the middle, right? So you have to be willing to get out of your comfort zone and to actually look at places that don't necessarily always agree with what you think, because opinions, birds of a feather flock together. You've heard that saying, right? Usually we're talking about friend groups, but that's how our mind works too, right? We stay in the comfortable. And this is something in the classroom I teach all the time. Like, do a really good research paper. You have to go to the other side. You've got to look so that you have a true picture of, what people agree with, what people disagree with, and then digging for the why within that, right? So I think that realizing that it is your responsibility as a generation to continue society, it's not just proving your friend right or wrong or proving information right or wrong. It's for you to become an informed consumer, because sooner or later truth always comes out, and that's the truth. Maybe centuries, right? Like it may be years and years, but truth does come out. So it's really important. So on social media, just validating your source. What is that source coming from? Is it a sponsored source? Is that source tied to some political party? Is it tied to one of our main institutions in society? So our education system, our economy, religion, etc., our medical system. You need to look at that and see if it's tied to one of those things, because if it is, the information that you're going to get from that is going to be different than if it were from something else, right? So if you're going to check mainstream media for those type of things, you really want to know the source that you're getting the information from. You also want to know if the information that you're hearing is coming from something that was funded, like grant funded. I do a lot of work, obviously, in mental health care for those in the social sciences or emergency professions. And often stuff that I come across is, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how many people are depressed. But then I read it and it's sponsored as part of a grant. So a professor, potentially an academic, was given a grant to do research on depression. Chances are their findings going to be reported by the person that got the grant from in a very favorable way or unfavorable way, depending on the way that the grant was written, right? So those are just things that are going to help you to be more informed as to where you're getting the information, if it's a valid source or not. You also mentioned earlier the date. So I know you had mentioned to me that some stuff is coming from like 2016. I think you said it a couple of minutes ago too, right? And people are posting those pictures with information, acting as if they're true today in 2024. Because the situations were similar, right? But it's not the same thing. So always checking the date of your source is critical. I can go on today and get stuff from 20 years ago because history repeats itself, right? I can get stuff from 20 years ago today and sit here and give you a 3-hour lecture on it, and you'll think that it's true and it has nothing to do with the situation that we're in today. It's just similar.
Yeah.
But there's different variables. And so that tells us that it's not true. So validating the date. So when you do a research paper for a class and your professor says you cannot use any academic resources older than 5 years, we're not doing that to be difficult. One of the reasons we do that is because usually after 3 to 5 years, too much has changed. And depending on the topic, like I have some classes 1 year. If it wasn't published within the last year, so it's actually 2 years because this year, and then you can go 1 year back. I don't actually want to, I'm not going to call that valid unless it's some kind of groundbreaking research that has stood the test of time. So checking the date on your source is super important, and checking out where does that source come from. I have to say this because I have a lot of students who come into college who think that Wikipedia is a valid site. And if you look online today, literally, you can hear a topic, go and Google what that person says, put it in, and look in Wikipedia. All the time, I see those exact words in Wikipedia. So there are several sites like Wikipedia that are actually made up and edited by individuals at any time. Those are not valid sources.
Yeah.
That's somebody sharing their opinion, right? Sharing the information that they have about the opinion, but there's nothing to validate that source. There's nothing to tell us that this is true, right? And the only way that we actually ever really know the truth is to inundate ourselves with all the information that we can about a topic on both sides, right? As I mentioned, not just our side. And until you start seeing the same thing over and over and over again that has its veins somewhere in research, something in validity, then you can start believing it, right? We have to be really careful because we don't know what people are saying, right? So I know on social media, you're not going to go and say like, oh, is there an academic journal article that talks about this? You're probably not going to do that. But I would encourage you to do that because chances are in the social sciences, we have done research on whatever topic it is, even if it's political unrest. You know, I've done a ton of research in Africa and looking at international criminal law violations. Sure, we can look at Burundi from 1991. And if something's going on in Burundi today, you can go back to the research looking back at Burundi in 1991, and you're actually going to find a really good fundamental understanding of the way that the government works.
Yeah.
And that's going to tell us something when we're evaluating what's happening today, right? Because if the government hasn't changed and it was set up like this, then it's still going to be the same. So it is useful sometimes to go and look at academic journal articles to have that validity when you're assessing just your social media information. I'm not talking about classroom information now. I'm not talking literature review right now. I'm just talking like social media information. So on the short though, check your source, check the date of your source. And I think for some reason, I just feel like I need to tell people, you just have to be bold. You just have to be bold, and we have to be willing to pursue truth over popularity. I think that's the big thing is we get stuck in that popularity thing, as I mentioned earlier. Like if we want to stop the cycle of misinformation, stop the cycle of disinformation, you have to be willing to stand on integrity. So you have to be willing to say, hey, I know that this article is saying this and thousands of people believe it, but look, this fact is not true because here's the truth. And you yourself are pulling in that truth to show people, hey, look, this is where this information come from. They typed a 6 instead of a 9. You see? So standing on that truth. And then also with the disinformation, you know, I think of all like the weight loss shots right now that people are like going crazy over. And it concerns me because I'm like, well, have you actually read the research on that? Right.
Yeah.
Because some of that is disinformation. You know, it's a bad example, but it's an easy example of just one of those things that when there's a push, sometimes we forget to look because we say, well, doctor said that. And I can tell you my experience just as from being a PhD is a student often believes any word I say. And you know this from having me in class. I will tell you, don't believe every word I say. Challenge me. If I'm not right, you come across something and I'm not correct in the information that I gave you, please tell me because I'm human, right? Sometimes we just make a mistake and we provide misinformation. So you have to be willing to be brave and you have to be willing to stand on the pillar of truth, realizing that our society cannot continue to run off of everybody else's opinions and everybody else's experiences and everybody else's truths, right? We have to stand on the truth for the greater good so as to not continue to erode the social fabric of society, which is super, super important. And that's why we see so many of our values and morals changing in the United States today, likely because of social media.
Yeah. And I wanted to touch on two things that you said, which one was checking the other side. I think that's really important. And also not taking a figure who has a large following or anything like that, taking their word for what it is and what they're saying. I know there was a video of, it was like a New York Instagram account, and the guy made a video talking about the situation in Venezuela, and it was completely wrong, really. And just everyone started commenting, being like, you haven't taken the time to look at the other side of things. I think that if you come from Venezuela or from other Latin American countries, you can tell between misinformation and disinformation very easily. Mostly if you lived it, you know how it is. But people on the outside, and it happened a lot with friends that are from here, that it's very hard to understand, like you mentioned before, how a government is able to do what they do and drive a country to that point, when Venezuela was also one of the biggest countries with the best economy for a while and everything. And now it's one of the most poor, like poor
Mm-hmm.
population is huge. And I think that if you're in it, it's easy. If you're out of it, you have to put in the work. So it's, if it's a new topic to you, you have to put in the work and the research. And you can't just take one article because the president of another country said something and you're like, well, this one said this, but then you have 16 other people of authority saying the
Mm-hmm.
contrary, but you don't want to look that way because you agree with these two that said something else. And having that video, for example, in such a huge platform, because it had a huge following, people started reporting the video for misinformation and started commenting, being like, don't believe what this is happening. And also not attacking the person for what they said in the video, but being like, you need to go one step further to understand the situation. Because I understand that you have been privileged enough to live in a country that has never gotten to that point. And
Mm-hmm.
it's most likely not going to get there, but you have the privilege to know democracy and to know that things work this way. So you believe that when a president wins, they win, but you haven't been on the other side where things are rigged, there's misinformation, there's people. So it's really mostly, if you are a person of authority, if you have a large following, if you have something, one, make sure that what you're telling people is true. And you, as someone who's listening, don't take every word they say and just be like, yep, that's the truth. My professor said it, so that's the truth. I've had moments where I'm like, professor, that's not, like, I don't think that's how it is. And it's not disrespectful, it's having a conversation of being like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's what's happening. I don't think things are like this. You explain your point of view, and then they'll explain theirs. And that's also something that I think it's super important when it comes to information. If you're giving information and you then can't argue your point, you have no point, you have no standing. That's one of the biggest things that you have to be able to do. And it's not necessarily to get someone to agree with you, but it's so you also know that what you believe in has a foundation, has background, has validity, and maybe my opposing view does too. And there's no need for us to agree, but we both have a good standing and a good understanding of both sides of things. And I think that's super important, because also a lot of people just say stuff and then you can argue and then be like, oh, I read something else. Like, I don't think it's like this. And people will be like, well, that's what I think. Be able to argue your point. Like, that's the
Mm-hmm.
main thing. And when you're not able to argue something, either you didn't do your research or there's no research. backing up what it is that you're saying. So both of those things are super important. And it goes back to checking your information and being able to really stand your ground in what it is you believe and why, and have the
Mhm.
evidence to support the claims that you're making. And that
That's
goes
right.
for like whether it's opposing views, whatever. And what you said, which actually goes back to that, if you're able to argue, like to argue something really well in your point of view, you have to understand the other point of view. And to have a conversation with someone about that, it's to be able to understand why they think like that. You understand that you also have information on that, and you're able to rebuttal their information or say, listen, I understand why you think this, but there's also 10 other things that discredit what you're saying. So,
Mhm.
and that also goes for research papers and any research thing that you're going to have to do. And that creates strength because you're not creating a biased paper. You're putting also, listen, I understand that there is this side of things. But even with this point, there are 15 other articles discrediting that.
Mhm.
And this is why I believe that we should think on these 15 articles before believing this one article or this one rebuttal. Or even if there's five rebuttals, you get 15. Um, so I think that's really important, and just really the two sides of things to
Mhm.
understand and have a complete picture of what's going on. You can't have tunnel vision and just believe I'm right in what I believe. I'm not even going to look the other way. If anyone comes up to me with an opposing point of view, I'm not even going to talk to them, because then you're being ignorant. You're not taking in what is going on, and to listen to people and to understand and to be able to hold your ground is what's going to make your opinion strong, your research paper strong, and you are going to be a person also that is open to understanding new things. And maybe in one of those conversations you're the one that's proved wrong, and you're
Mhm.
going to be like, oh wow, you know what, I didn't know that. And that's fine to admit that you were wrong. Everyone makes a mistake, everyone sees something that was not real, and it's easy to get caught up in that. But you have to do the effort again to not have that tunnel vision, to go
Mhm.
one step further, to check for validity, to check the other side,
Mhm.
and have a complete, well rounded understanding of anything you're researching, any situation that's going on, anything that you see in social media. Because it's never it's it one side is wrong, one side is right. Like, there's an understanding that has to be there. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, totally. So I was going to say, I think that it's really important that, oh, let me start it this way. You know, the saying, knowledge is power. You've heard that
Yeah.
before, probably, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, whatever, knowledge is power. They make fun of it. They don't get it. But truly, knowledge is something that people can't take from you. And we, unfortunately, largely because of social media, don't care so much about knowing the truth, right? We forgot that knowledge part. We care more, again, about the followers, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think a lot of what you're saying is really important, because there isn't always a right or wrong. There's two different sides, right? So if our quest is knowledge and to be informed people in society and to be well informed within our mind, so then we can form an opinion. And that's important too. Often we form our opinion and then we look for the research, right? The research should actually play a role in helping us to determine our opinion based on both sides, right? Otherwise, you're kind of biased in the research you even look for. I tell students that all the time. Like if you're already, you're already biased by the, and as a social researcher, I am too. We all are. You're already a little bit biased by the topic that you choose, so you already have an interest in that topic, right?
Yeah.
So putting your ego down is huge if you're on the quest for truth. It cannot be about right or wrong. It can't be about proving your friends right or wrong. The motivation to determine truth needs to be a personal motivation so that you can then become an advocate for the truth based off of the research, right? So being humble, putting your ego down, and not searching for right or wrong, but searching to be informed regarding a topic is really how that focus has to go. So believe it or not, Isabella, it really confuses students when I tell them in a research paper, let me remind you, there is no right or wrong. It's not about just doing it. It's about how well do you do it? How well
Yeah.
can you argue this topic, right? I don't care what your topic is, really don't care what your research question is, as long as it's written appropriately, right? But what I am expecting is that you're going to research your variables, and let's say you have two variables in your research question, that you are going to look at both sides of those variables so that you come to the table, as you're saying, with information, with validated information through academic research articles, in this case, if it's in a classroom, and you argue that point, right? I don't care what side you choose. You choose whatever it is that you want to say, whatever your point is that you want to make. You make that point, but you don't make the point because that's your opinion. You don't make your point because you think that's what's right or that's what you're interested in. You should go through that process of reading research and be open to whatever those results tell you, whether it is in line with kind of your beliefs and your opinion or not. And I'll tell you, as a researcher, as a social scientist, one of my favorite things is when I'm proved completely wrong in research. And by wrong, what I mean is in my head, I kind of have an idea like, okay, I think this is where this is going to go. And then at the end, by the time I've conducted all the research, that is not what I found. That's so awesome because I'm like, that's telling us like the truth is not what we think, right? Like often the truth is affected by so many other things. And we forget that too, right? That the truth is not just I mean, if we can look on social media and see a 10-second post or 5-second post or listen to a 2-minute video and come up with our opinion based off of that, we got serious problems because think of how many other things are affecting that topic that is being presented or talked about, right? We forget about that. There's all these different variables in all these different settings amongst all these different peoples and different cultures, different personalities, all these different little things that affect everything that we are reading, everything that we are hearing. And so it's important that you lay your ego down, that you realize it's not right or wrong. It's really the quest for knowledge. And having that knowledge, I think, is super empowering. If you can gain knowledge about a topic and know both sides and be able to tell you, now you can have an opinion. Tell me your opinion based off of truth, right? And truth of both sides. Like I choose to believe this or to, I choose to use this product because it aligns with this, and this. Although I know that some people, and now you present the other side of the research, right? Okay, that's great because you're not saying it's about your opinion and it's not about you being right. It's you making what we call informed decisions. And that's what we often lack, especially through social media and the topic that we're talking about today. We lack that. We lack informed decision making. Your social media thing that you're watching, that doesn't really qualify as being an informed decision maker. Just because 2 million people like it does not mean that the person that started it, as you said from the beginning, from the person that originally lit the fire, things affected it all along the way. And sometimes it's as easy as a click of a button. So information that was not right from the beginning just spreads like wildfire, right? So you have to want to do research for the right reason. And that is really just to understand a topic fully. And to be able to have educated decisions with people. A lot of people in college, especially students, they don't really care about that. They think, I got to do research. But, a lot of them are going to be parents someday, and you're going to be a professional someday. And don't you want to be able to have informed discussions with people? One of my favorite things about the conversations that my daughter and I have is we both know, like, there's another side to this. We love to talk about that research side of things. Her and I believe completely different things often. And she'll present me with research. And I'm like, I have never even seen that body of research. So then I got to start reading all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? She was right. Like there's a whole nother side to this that I never even considered because I hadn't looked. So, that has to be a personal thing. And I think you need to take that seriously. And instead of looking at a research paper or looking to validate something that you hear on social media, instead of looking at it as like daunting, which I think a lot of people do, especially research papers, right? I can't believe I have to write this paper. Instead of looking at it as like, oh, it's a research paper. Oh, I guess I'll go the extra step and see if this is true. It's like a scavenger hunt. Like this is a cool thing. Like you're going to find out the truth of a topic. And then you have the opportunity to share that truth with others, right? And the truth is so important in the society, especially that is so inundated with disinformation. from a lot of different ways, right? So you have to make that personal though, if that makes sense. You can't just want to do it because most people don't. Like, it has to be something personal that you just want to be smarter and you
Yeah.
want to have that knowledge, so that you can carry on discussion and just share that truth.
And
Super
even
important.
beyond just like the research that you do for a paper or for academic reasons or whatever, like I said before, just being able to have a conversation with someone, because
Yep.
a lot of times you're going to have conversations with people that they don't necessarily agree with what you're saying,
Hmm.
or you're going to find people that are not knowledgeable in a certain topic that's being talked about. You being able to have that conversation, if they disagree with you, to understand them, to talk about it with them, to give them your points and why you think the way you do, or to educate someone. I think that, like, how could you not want to do that? Mostly if you're having the conversation about that topic, it's probably because someone or even you cares enough about that topic to bring it up in conversation. So it's something that you're going to care about because you're talking about it.
Hmm.
And you can't just talk to someone about something that you say you're passionate in and you want to talk about without having the validity and like
Hmm.
good research behind it that supports your point. So I think it goes even beyond that. Like, don't think of research as the 10-page paper that you have to do for your sociology class. It goes beyond that. Everything in your everyday life and your conversations have research backing up what you're saying. Hopefully,
Yep.
they have
Yep.
research backing
Yeah.
up what you're
Right.
saying.
Yep.
Hopefully. But like I said, and I think a lot of people don't notice that certain topics, if it's brought up, is because someone in your group or in that place that you were cares about that topic and you're in that conversation,
Yep.
probably for a reason, probably because you also care to talk about it. Because if you don't, you're most likely just going to be quiet. But if
Hmm.
you're the person that brings up the topic, that cares about it, be able to argue your point, to have a good conversation with someone. That I think that today also a lot of people aren't open to having a conversation. They hear someone disagrees and it's just like, all right, you think whatever you want.
It's
Like, I don't give.
ego. It's ego.
And it's
It's
like,
people that think that they're right.
yeah, and it's like, put that aside. Like, where is your wanting to understand other people, to connect with them, even if it's agree to disagree, to hear someone? Because also, you're not going to get very far if any anyone that disagree with you, you just push them aside and I don't ever want to hear from you again. That's not going to get you anywhere.
Hmm.
You can't just stick to what you believe in, and anyone that doesn't agree with you can't talk to you. And then also, if you are that person, then you're just surrounding yourself with people that have the same beliefs as you. And then again, you're stuck in that tunnel vision
Hmm.
where you're not going to look the other way.
Hmm.
And that is not a good environment, not a good headspace. It shuts you out to a wide perspective of everything that is going on around you. So I think that's really important to understand that research is not just a paper that you write in class. Research is all around you, probably in your conversations.
Hmm.
When you talk about anything, really, there are papers backing that up.
Yeah. And I think also too, Isabella, with what you're saying, it's kind of funny to me that people are like, "Oh, we don't need to look at any research in regard to what we're hearing on social media," because do you know what social media is based off of? At least Instagram, the algorithm.
Oh, yeah.
That's research. So like even in TikTok too, like they all have their own little thing. And it's funny to me when people are like, "Oh, I'm an influencer." I'm like, of course you are, because you learn what to do to initiate the system, to know what you need to do to show up on a computer program that has been designed for tracking so that they can boost certain people, right? Like, it's so funny. I'm like, you're engaging in research. Like, you
Yeah.
are where you are because of research. You post what you post because of research. So it's always a little bit funny to me when I hear things like that. Cause I'm like, hold on a minute, but you're so worried about what time you post and when you post and who you tag and all that. I'm like, well, you are engaging in research. So I had to throw that out there. But I also think it's important that our our, I got to be real careful the word I want to use because, I just say it how it is. This one might not be pretty. So I'll try to tame it down a little bit. I will say that our ignorance, a lot of times, in understanding topics and to really know truth, have actually led to increases in things like anxiety, things of decreased self image, depression, and even suicide ideology, because often it is a peer response truth that we hold on to in social media. So you may think, I don't agree with this one, right?
Yeah.
But it's your friend, and you need her because you're trying to be an influencer, and so you can't lose any followers. And this whole weird thing comes into it, right? It's like a peer game. It's like we're all on recess trying to play together, right? You don't lose a friend. And
Yeah.
so we play these little games and we hang on to information, or we don't stand bold and brave like we should in the face of truth. And what that does, that actually makes you a mess inside because you know that you're not saying something about something that you know to not be true based off of research. Maybe it's something you don't ethically agree with, morally agree with because of your religion or view of spirituality, whatever it is. So you choose to not say anything, right? You don't like the post, you don't share the post, you choose not to say anything. So it's kind of like in criminology when we talked about, well, was it a crime by act or omission? Right. So sometimes us not saying anything causes us chemical reactions from a headspace perspective, depression, anxiety. And I think people forget that. People don't realize that, right? It's no different than, being with a bunch of friends. Like in my generation, we didn't have social media. So, being with a bunch of friends in a friends group and somebody speaking something that you don't sit right with, but I never got rid of that friend. It's no different. Right. And so it actually played with my head because I felt guilty, right? Like, oh, I probably should have said something. Like, I don't think what they're doing is right. And I know for a fact that what they're doing is wrong. And this is how I know it. We have to be willing to stand on it. So it's weird. Like social media starts playing some weird things. And so two things I just want to say there in regards to you're actually engaging with research. So I guess you do like research now. Good job. You're a good little study participant. We appreciate you. And you just have to be really well informed and just brave, right? I mean, that's just really the bottom line. I do, though, or I will tell you how sometimes this stuff can get to really bad places, even outside of social media, and how misinformation and disinformation can lead us down some really slippery slopes in research. And one thing in particular, just real quick, I'll just give you a quick example of marijuana legislation. We'll just go back to the state of Colorado when they were going to legalize marijuana. And of course, there were both sides of things when they were going to legalize it for recreational purposes. The first time it failed, the second time when they had to vote to have it legalized for recreational purposes. And the huge campaign was that this would put information into our public school system, right? And so that's what was being used to sway voters to vote to legalize marijuana for recreational purposes because we needed state revenue for our school system. And there were a lot of new people moving into Colorado, a lot of things that needed to be redone within our school system. And that tax revenue was needed in many areas, but most of which is our school system. So I say this because after the amendment passed, and they're just like interviewing people, even like, oh, what was it that pushed you over this time to vote positive, to vote yes on this amendment? People mentioned, well, the revenue money that could go into our school system is really important to me. I'm an educator as a teacher, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of the stories. But no one ever looked to see, one, can you take money from marijuana sales and put it into an education system? And the answer to that is no. So people voted to pass an amendment based off of education. But the reality is because marijuana is and was and is still illegal on the federal level, and schools receive federal funding of some type. So even if they have a lunch program, so even if it's a private school, but they have a lunch program or any type of program that's somehow related to the federal government, because that drug is still illegal on the federal level, you cannot take money that's coming from something at a state level that's legal and put it into anything that's funded federally. It's money laundering. So when Colorado figured this out, it took them a while after they passed. And it's kind of funny because the California governor had warned Colorado, like, hey, don't do this. You're going to have problems with your money because it's money laundering. You can't just dump it into your schools. So after a lot of strategy, they ended up basically starting a foundation in which they could funnel the money into a foundation, and then that foundation could give the schools money. So that's kind of how they
Mm.
found the loophole to go around it. But did you know that none of that money from dispensaries could go into our banks? That's money laundering because it's drug money, right? So they had to, and California has done this as well, where they actually have money cleaning businesses that would literally come and pick up the cash from dispensaries, wash the money, and then deposit only into certain credit unions because a federal insured bank could not take that money. So my point is, see how something so small, like, hey, yeah, we all need money for education, provide a lot of money coming in, tax revenue for the state. It's going to go into here. We're going to vote this. We're going to pass this. But people hadn't looked to see if they could even do that. And it was a big mess. It was a huge mess in the state. And that's just one example of the things that we, dealt with within Colorado with legalization. I could talk for days about the other things that we dealt with, but that's just a really kind of eye-opening thing. And so I think of right now and what's on the agenda for Florida, same thing. You look at all the different things, and it's like, even when you go to vote, are you looking at the topic outside of the political lens? Right. So if you're looking to legalize, okay, I don't care. You legalize or not legalize, it doesn't matter. But can you do what you're saying that you're going to do with the revenue that comes from that product? Can you do that and put it where you say you're going to do it? Because if not, where's that money going to go? I mean, just kind of a little example of kind of how these things can play out, right? And how important it's always so much more than just a topic. It's always so many more things, as I mentioned earlier, so many different variables to be considered. And it's just important that we all become informed consumers. Otherwise, someday we're going to live in a world where we don't even know what truth is. And I think that in a lot of ways, in some aspects, we're already sitting there in this world right now. There's a lot of confused people not knowing what truth is.
Yeah.
They only know what they see, right? Through social media, through other media outlets, through what their friends say. And that's all that they believe. And I'll tell you that I know that there are people in classrooms that will believe what someone says in the classroom that they saw on TikTok over what I'm telling them that I know to be valid and true. That's scary.
Yeah.
Scary, right?
Yeah.
So you just have to be really careful in critically evaluating information, looking at both sides. And mostly you need to be motivated to do that for truth, for the betterment of society, right? It's a social responsibility aspect that, like, hey, we all have a responsibility to better the society and move society in a right direction. And if you see yourself as a part of that, which you are, you take that responsibility seriously, right? And one person at a time, one topic at a time, we try to continue to just find truth. And it's super important as we continue as a society, for sure. And I think COVID taught us that,
Yeah.
right? I mean, COVID is a prime example of that. Homeschooling, we're seeing the effects of that from COVID. I mean, we could talk for days about the different topics and what was said, what we saw, what was truth, what we say. I'm not saying
Yeah.
anything opinion wise there, right? I'm just saying, like, those are good topics to show you
Yeah.
that some people made drastic decisions in their lives without knowing the other side, good or bad. So super important, because we've seen how things can affect a society. Truth, misinformation, and disinformation, all three affect society in drastic ways, right? You just kind of have to pick and choose which one you're going to go with.
Yeah. And I think that, again, one point that I want to bring up again is those with misinformation or disinformation, they know the tactics to get you to believe it. And what you were talking about right now with the legalization, many people would be opposed to it, but funding for education, like, they know how to get you. Also, maybe that wasn't exactly the thing, but it did bring a lot of people who are interested in education and care for that to legalize it, because it's going to help the education system. So also keep in mind that these people and everything that everyone puts out, it's going to get you in some way, whether you realize it or not. And it's up to you to go one step further, to check your sources, to check what it is you're seeing, to not take the fact that you saw 10 different videos on it for it being true. Because, and also with promotions and everything, those 15 people that posted the same video saying that that one product is amazing are getting paid to say that that product is amazing. So then it's not really like
Right.
you don't know.
Right.
So yeah, and just really check your sources, check the opposite
Mhm.
side, check dates of the sources that you're saying,
Mhm.
and be willing and open to have conversations with people who might disagree with you. So you can either, if you genuinely think that they are wrong in what they're saying, you can educate someone. Like, you don't have to be a teacher to educate someone and have someone learn about a product, a
Mhm.
a position or anything. You can do it
Mhm.
yourself if you take the time to educate yourself so that you can talk about it with other people.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's
So I think what would be really cool this week, I would encourage our listeners to post questions that they have about topics or things that they want to share about research or things that frustrate them or, why they don't think it's important or why they do think it's important. I think every listener has a good opportunity to have, someone who is a researcher. I'm an academic, obviously a PhD, and someone obviously who's more of a consumer probably of what our younger crowd is used to, right? That I'm still learning.
yeah.
But you really have a good opportunity to ask your questions about research and ask your questions about truth. I think on another segment early on, let us know what your research papers are for the semester. Schools are getting ready to start. Like, I'd be happy to give you some tips on writing a research paper and how do you determine the difference between sources and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll get a really good research methods professor that'll do that with you. Sometimes not so much. And so I think this week, I'd encourage you guys to obviously follow us if you're not following us, and definitely, post your questions, your thoughts, whatever. We'd love to engage with you that way. So thanks for
Yeah.
listening today.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Illuminating Haze. Join us in 2 weeks as our hosts Isabella and Dr. Kara Hill bring another important topic to guide your future. See you then.